Hi, guys. Thanks for joining. Hi, Adina. We have a small group. Something is going on, Valentine's there's too much love and we can't deal with so much love. So everything is late, but we are all happy and sunny and cold and all good. So
Great.
Adina, I met Adina like during COVID or something like that. I acted as her external examiner for her master's thesis when she was doing it for Aalto University. So since then, I said, oh, this is a really interesting project she did. And she was in my radar and said, at some point, I would like her to come and talk to you guys. So if I'm not mistaken, so she's based in Switzerland. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So she's going to give you a little bit an overview of her career, what she's doing, the different ways you can work with data, with visualization, and in particular, she's working for the newspaper there in Switzerland, so she's going to give you a sense of what the work involves, and probably many other interesting things. So thanks so much, Adina, for joining today. We are really excited to watch your presentation and hear you. So we have people online from Canada and somewhere else, and we are here listening to you. So whenever you are ready, we are all ears.
Thank you, Sheila. Hi, everyone across the ocean. So nice. Hi, to be here in this virtual space with you. As Sheila was saying, my name is Adina Renner, and I will be talking mainly about my work as a visual editor at the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, which is a Swiss daily newspaper. And I want to talk a little bit why we think that visual data-driven news stories are sometimes worth 1,000 written words. And I will not only talk about work that we do there, I also want to give you a little bit of a personal background. I remember when I was a student not that long ago, did I like to hear how people kind of came from point A to point B to point C, because there's always so many nice ways to get to a point. And then I will talk a little bit about NZZ, Neue Zürcher Zeitung. NZZ is for short. And then I will show you two kind of behind the scene looks of larger stories that we did with the hope to inspire you to maybe also consider a career in journalism. And if not, then just hopefully inspire you with visual storytelling. Maybe also we can have a discussion afterwards. About visual storytelling, multimedia storytelling, because this is very much where my passion lies. I will also have a short summary of the tools and skills we need to do these kind of stories. And then, as I said, there's time for ideas and questions. And I will actually stop after each kind of larger part of the presentation. So if you have questions there, let's also just dive into them right then. So a little bit about myself. I will start quite at the beginning of my life, but don't worry, I won't go through every year. There will be some jumps after this. I have always liked to work visually. I have always liked storytelling, photography, visualization, and all this kind of creative work. But I also have a side in me that likes to be very observant, scientific. This is kind of a data set I created about my plants when I was about 7 years old. And I've always liked to make my own data sets and kind of get an overview over complex developing situations like that. I started my studies more in this creative sector. I did a bachelor's in visual communications in Zurich. This was very print focused, very typography focused, kind of traditional graphic design. And after my studies, I was not that interested in print. I wanted to go more into newer media. So I did an internship at Interactive Things. They do really nice work if you're interested in looking them up. They're a small studio here in Zurich, and they do kind of web applications that at their center is always some kind of data visualization or interaction with data. And after that, I could work as an interaction designer at a larger company, a consulting company. And there I came into contact with this whole topic of open data. We were consulting a lot of government agencies on the national and also on the local level, and helping them open their data up to the public. And I really noticed that I am actually really interested in not just kind of the design part, but also connecting content and design and translating content into design. So that is when I applied as a data visualization designer at the newspaper I work now. This is the portfolio you see on the right that I applied with, kind of a mix out of typography, multimedia, maps, and this was not accepted in that sense, but it motivated me then to continue my studies, to go back to school and study information design at Aalto University in Helsinki in Finland. And I really enjoyed my studies there. The Nordic, or at least Finland, is very much into service design, participatory design. You see the local library here, or like the city library, that has as a motto instead of owning, borrow. So there's this kind of like participatory idea of sharing instead of consuming. And this was very interesting to me. And I want to also talk shortly about my master's thesis. I looked into the question of how participatory information design can make data-driven government publications more useful, usable, and meaningful to a kind of broad target audience. I think someone wants to join. Well, great. And my case study was this report, kind of a dense report on early childhood education and care in Europe. It was targeted towards policymakers and researchers mainly, but of course they also wanted to reach parents and journalists with this report. This was published by the EU. And so this was then my master's thesis, was called Beyond the PDF, Transforming Data-Driven Government Publications Through Participatory Information Design. And there's quite a large part in there also that's theoretical, so reflecting on what information design is, reflecting on different approaches to information design. And this is where I actually came across the book from Sheila. I will also show you afterwards. I don't know if you see it, but anyway, I can recommend it because I was very inspired by it, inspired by the approach that was described there, which was very involved in going out into the field, talking to people about what you are trying to design and involving them in this process. And I really like to engage with people. I don't like to be only just behind my screen. So this really spoke to me as well. And as Sheila was mentioning, she was my thesis evaluator, and I think probably one of the only people who read my thesis so thoroughly. So still thankful for that. Yes, as I was just saying, I kind of took this approach from Sheila's book. This is a simplified version of the kind of process she describes there. I observed and explored, so I did a lot of workshops, interviews with people. Then I would kind of synthesize this data from these interactions and analyze it, and then prototype solutions to those problems that I could see there and evaluate those solutions. And I did this circle about 3 times. And so how this looked was like this. This was the observe and explore phase. You can see us on the right, top right, we have this experience map where we try to like understand how people use the report. We would also sketch together And yeah, there were a lot of different exercises that we did with different user groups. And I tried to synthesize my work, or like the insights that I gathered from those interactions visually. So I visualized the roles and the tasks that people use this report for. And I also visualized how they read the report, which was quite different depending on if they're a civil servant or, you know, a researcher or a parent. And I tried to differentiate how what they needed. So I like the scope and depth that they needed, how they would connect topics across the report, and kind of the emotional tone that they would come with, like it was defined by their role, and would also reflect in how they would use the report. Then I made about 5 different prototypes, design prototypes, and then this was the final one. You can see that there are different, like in the menu, in the navigation, you can see different ways to enter into this report. Like you can enter through countries, or you can look at stories, or you can just have a short overview of the topics or of the content, and you can also go into each topic of the report. So this is like a topic page about the participation rates, and then if you kind of scroll down, you have these data visualizations that can in themselves, they can also stand for themselves, they can also be embedded somewhere else, and I don't have a mouse here, so I can't really show you, but if you see below under the chart, there's those sources which are also underlined. So if you click onto one of those sources, you get this kind of context menu, which describes the data set that is used for this visualization. And you can download the data. You can see like which entity has created this data, and then how this data is used in the report. And you can also jump to other places in the report in which this data is used. So this is very important for these kind of organizations, as they have kind of a large collection of data sets, and there's actually a lot of data and a lot of entry points into that data that can be provided to different types of users. And with that, I kind of, the master's thesis was one thing that I could do there, of course, but Aalto is also a very applied university, so there are a lot of companies that come to the university and want to work with students, and through that I could really build a very data visualization and information design focused portfolio. So you kind of see the difference to the portfolio I showed you before, I hope. And with that I could apply. I applied again. I was very lucky. Right when I was finished with my studies, there was an open position at this newspaper again, and I got the job there. So a little bit about Neue Zürcher Zeitung, NZZ. This is this is the building, and it is actually the oldest still existing newspaper in Switzerland, one of the oldest in Europe. It was first published in 1780. This was the first edition you can see here, and people still kind of associate Neue Zürcher Zeitung with not quite this look, but this kind of idea that it's a very serious newspaper. It's more conservative. There's a lot of text also to it. And for the longest time, actually, the newspaper refused to publish first black and white images, and then it also took a very long time they published even color images. Nowadays, though, it looks very different. Our readers are mostly online, and most of them read our stories on a mobile device. And our articles are increasingly visual and data-driven. Not all of them look like this, but there are more and more that are that use images, data visualization, maps, video to tell or to inform our readers about the news. The team behind those stories is the visuals team, or one of the teams, the main team that drives visual stories, and it consists of kind of sub-teams, which are visual journalists, data journalists, programmers, and the newest team, which is OSINT specialists. It stands for Open Source Intelligence. They will research different topics from an open source perspective with satellite images, researching on social media, and so on. And we support our colleagues in different departments. So there is an element of this kind of news desk or this support desk, but more and more we collaborate with them, and we also create our own very visual stories. And maybe what's also interesting is when I started, we were 10 people. That was 4.5 years ago. Now we're 25. So it's one of the areas in the newspaper that's really growing. So what kind of stories do we do? I like to think about them in these 3 categories: visual stories, stories that use new storytelling formats, and then stories that are based on visual research and data analysis. And what I mean by those categories is that visual stories are stories that use data visualization, illustrations, maps, and so on, to inform our readers about the news. As I was saying before, we don't create very technically difficult or kind of innovative formats in this category. It's more about getting things out there quickly. And for example, a good example is we did an article about how to wear masks correctly, or on the right you also see an article that explains the Ukraine-Russia conflict that was before the 2022 invasion. So this is kind of our daily bread. Then we have new formats where we experiment with animation, with 3D, and with interactivity. So to the right, you see our interactive map on Ukraine. We update it daily, and we have a lot of readers that return to it again and again to look at what is going on in Ukraine. So that's a completely new format for journalism, right? And then the visual research category and the analysis category, mostly those articles are also visual in the end, but the research is very important. It's kind of an exclusive research that we do with exclusive findings that we then present in a visual way. So we were looking at palm oil concessions in Indonesia in the article on the left, and in the article on the right, we talk about the flights over Ukraine and how they have changed since the war. Throughout all of this work, we try to create tools and resources because time is always of the essence. We want to be fast and publish stories then when our readers are interested in those stories. So we have our own toolbox, which is called Q, and it contains a lot of different kinds of tools, but most importantly, it contains a very simple diagram tool. And all our journalists are required to make their own bar charts and their own line charts. And this means that this frees us up in the visuals team to actually create more innovative, more visual stories instead of making bar charts and line charts by hand. And then the other thing which you are welcome to also look at is our kind of living style guide. We have very classic things in there like colors, typography, but also we have something about scrollytelling. We looked at all the different types of scrollytelling that there are. So we use that as a kind of reference to talk about scrollytelling, you try new methods and so on. And in the meantime, we also have some more sections actually that might interest you as well. what I like to do the most are these stories that use new ways to to talk about a news event, and they give our readers a new kind of entry point to a topic, or they give readers a more engaging way to learn about a topic. And so the two stories I'm going to talk about are in this category. And maybe I will just quickly make a break here if someone has a question.
Question. So you mentioned your background was more in like visual communication and design. How was the journey kind of transitioning into journalism, and how much of your work is like balancing between making visuals versus the journalistic aspect of things?
I mean, in Switzerland, journalism is it's taught in a very hands-on way. So most of my colleagues have not gone to journalism school. So it's kind of expected that you learn on the job. And it's important in our newspaper, it's important that you come with a certain skill or like knowledge in a certain area. We have a lot of people who've done like PhDs in physics, or studied, I don't know, a certain language or a certain region for a very long time. And then you learn journalism at the newspaper. And so there's room to grow and to experiment. And with your second question, yeah, there's also another part to the first question, but I will talk about that later. With the second question, I have kind of transitioned, or yeah, maybe that's a good way to put it. I started in the visuals team, and I was there for 2 years. And now I am in they call it this matrix function. I am also part of the international team. So I actually sit with the international desk. I have a lot to do with our international editors, with the correspondents, and moving into that team also helped me be very close to the daily journalistic work. And I have learned a lot in these 2 years, and have also learned how to kind of translate between these two different departments, because yeah, there's different interests, of course. The journalists that write, they are very, very fast, especially in the international department. They do really daily journalism. In the morning we have a meeting. It's decided which stories we will run this day, and then people write the stories in a day. Whereas in the visuals department, stories are more. Sometimes we also do stories in like 2 or 3 days, but very often the stories are maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then they can take up until to a year or a few months. So I've moved more into this kind of role of a translator and role of a editor and project lead, kind of bringing together people from different departments to create very visual stories. And what I still do a lot is maps. I love to do maps, so that's something I love to do still myself.
That's cool. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Are there any other questions? Should we move on? Okay, there's more time as well afterwards. So both of these, well, actually, the first story is exactly comes from this role of being in the international department. I was reporting quite closely on first the war in Ukraine, and now the Israel-Hamas war. I will show a video where you see quite a lot of destruction of the Gaza Strip, but you won't see any graphic details otherwise, but just to let you know. So in this story, we try to leverage kind of newer reporting methods and online storytelling formats to report on an inaccessible conflict zone. And let me show you the article first. I will move to this quickly here. just that you get an idea what I'm even talking about. So we have also an international edition. So this article was translated to English, and it's about looking into what Israel is building in the Gaza Strip. And we have some text, and then we start with a map that gives kind of an overview of the different zones that Israel has been kind of building, or the Israeli army has been building, access roads that go into the Gaza Strip, and then different corridors that have been constructed. And then we go more into detail into this corridor here. And we have this very high resolution satellite imagery where you can kind of switch between the area, how it looked before the war, and then the area, how it looked in October 2024. We published in November, I think. And we explain different things that you can see on the satellite image. And you can always kind of switch back and check what is new, basically. We also show some videos of how the area was cleared, and then some details even closer into the satellite imagery, looking at these kind of military compounds that were built along the corridor. And this was an article that we did in about 2 to 3 weeks. So this is also part, I would say, of our daily, our kind of, yeah, our daily bread, so to say. Sorry?
That's like Sheila talking in the back.
Ah, okay, okay. No question? Or I didn't. Good, okay. Yeah, and we approach, I try to visualize our process. I mean, we don't have, this is not an official way how we approach stories, but I think this fits very much to how I like to think about it. So in the center, at the beginning, there is always a core question, and there must be newsworthiness. I will talk about newsworthiness a little bit later. Then we have a visual approach, visual resources, visual research methods, and visual source material that we can look at and review. And we have communication affordances, so what we want to show our readers, what do we want to tell them about, and how can we do that? And we have very practical restrictions, resources, and time restrictions mainly. So the core question here, as I was mentioning before, is what will happen to the Gaza Strip when the war ends? This was at a time where it was not clear what Israel was planning, if they were planning to stay there indefinitely or just control certain areas. And also just to mention that this is very much in the context of many, many different articles that we've done about this war, looking closer at the hostage situation, looking at the bombardment of the Gaza Strip and the situation of the Palestinians, looking at agriculture, looking at the military, looking at the IDF. So we try to just really go wide in all the different aspects that we look at. I mentioned before that our research method is also really based on the fact that we have limited access to this area. So we do have a correspondent in Israel, who you can see on the left. He might get access to like a tunnel that the Israeli Defense Forces uncovered in a guided tour, but he cannot enter the Gaza Strip. We also have 2 journalists on the ground, 2 Palestinians who have started working. They're very young. They have started working as journalists during this war. You can see them interviewing a farmer for one of the stories that we did on agriculture. but still, it's hard to really grasp what is going on there. And so one of the ways that we can kind of gain insight into what is going on is through satellite imagery. So that was as you saw, that was our main way to approach this article. I love to work with satellite imagery. We have, I think, was it 4,000 satellites orbiting Earth at any time. About 70% are for communication, but then a fifth is actually for Earth observation. So they are orbiting Earth. They have sensors that are can catch up on certain things such as water and altitude, and also just taking images of how things are developing. And something that's very important is resolution. So you have open access satellite imagery that is up until Sentinel-2. That's open source. Sentinel-2 is by the EU, Landsat is by the US. And then you have private satellite companies, and they have much higher resolution. So depending on what story you want to tell and what you want to find out, you have to go for different options. And so this is an open source satellite image from Sentinel-2. And this is often something we use to start to kind of get a feeling what has happened. There's also an image every, I think, fourth day or so, fourth or fifth day. So there's quite a lot of images. And we looked, so this was the Gaza Strip before the war, and then this was in October. And you can also see already these kind of paths that are leading into the Gaza Strip and the corridor in the middle there. Oh, sorry. We talked to an expert who also looks at these satellite images daily, and he felt that the other roads that were visible, that they were mostly access roads, and that where it became a question of infrastructure was really in this Netzarim corridor in the middle there, and because there you could see that military bases were being built up, and infrastructure that could also be left there permanently. Then we organized high resolution satellite imagery from this area. And so you can see this is from October 24 and this is from October 23. And so we had these long strips of imagery that we could use. The next point was thinking about how we want to tell the story and what we need to show that our readers understand what is going on. And we had three kind of goals. So the one was to provide an overview over the situation. Then we wanted to highlight and explain features on the satellite image. And we wanted to show a development, show what had happened before and after. And at the same time, actually, while we were working on this, Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, they published a really great piece about this corridor as well, with kind of a 3D flight over the landscape and kind of diving in with videos, and it was a really great piece. Unfortunately, we didn't have the resources at the moment to do that, so we had to think about other ways to tell the story. And that's where we are with restrictions. So this is also always a part of the process. Yeah, so the overview, as you saw, we showed in the piece, we showed the Gaza Strip in the beginning as kind of a scrolly telling, explaining all the different areas and corridors. And we use our Q tool. We have a scrolly telling tool where you can add different like images in different sizes for different devices. And you can add text and you can make the text different colors and so on. So this is something we already have and use quite frequently. So that was that part that you saw. Guide our readers through a complex topic or a complex, for example, it could also be an infographic where we explain and reveal things step by step. Then to highlight and explain features on the satellite image, this is something specific to satellite images that you kind of, as you work with them, you kind of learn to read them. You learn, you know, this gray thing is a fire, but this other gray thing is a cloud. But our readers, of course, have not learned that. And so we have to be very conscious of how we put a lot of work into annotating the satellite image, making sure that certain parts pop out and are very clearly distinguishable from what is not so important in that image, because there's a lot going on always. So we also have those close-ups where we explain in detail. Something that also is important here is to really use the format. In print, you always kind of think more horizontally, but because most of our readers are on mobile, we always try to think vertically. So trying to really use that image and fill the screen as much as we can with that image. And then to show the developments, we have this kind of toggle already as an image comparison tool also in our toolbox. But of course, because the image is so long, we couldn't just put that on top. So this is something that we developed specifically for this story, that the toggle kind of sticks to the top of the screen, and you can always switch back and forth no matter where you are. So for this, we added one of our developers to the team who made this element for us. And this is a kind of typical example of how we try to, in smaller stories, we try to also have some kind of technical innovation that we can then document in our style guide and reuse in other stories. And with each story that we do, we can develop this element a little bit further. And through that, we kind of try to stay on top of different like new storytelling formats. We had very high reader interest, especially for the English article. They came via search, so it was also showing us that people were looking, or were kind of asking this question. They were looking for answers. What was going on? What are the Israeli Defense Forces doing, and what is Israel planning? And yeah, I think that was mainly so through search that we had a lot of engagement. And to get back to this idea of newsworthiness, something that we learn in journalism school, I've heard, is that when you try to gauge the newsworthiness of a story, there's this acronym NITPIC. So a story has to be novel, it has to have impact, it has to be timely, it has to be close, there has to be interest in it, and there has to be a conflict. And that makes a story newsworthy. And with text, we can then describe this newsworthy story. We can describe what happened, who is affected, how are they affected, when did it happen, where. So all these W questions that you also know, I'm sure. And I think for me, with visualization, we are able to kind of, for one, engage our readers, but also talk about more complex connections within this topic. So as when we visualize, we can describe how did it happen. So we can use infographics to describe a complex process, or we can also describe how many are affected, how much is affected. We can show that through a data visualization, for example. We can show when did something happen where, as we are doing here with this piece. And we can also talk much more about the relation or show the relation of things to each other. So this corridor, how does it stand in relation to those access roads, for example? We can show how one stands to many. I'm sure you've seen these data visualizations that pick out kind of one data point and then talk about that data point, and then put that data point back into the whole data visualization or the whole data set. And we can, in terms of conflict, I think with visualization, we often crystallize what we actually know and what we don't know, because when we visualize, we can't describe something kind of vaguely. We have to always decide, do we put the line there or do we put it here? So there's no kind of vague descriptions of things in visualizations most of the time. So those are the two things that this story covers mainly, and the visuals cover mainly. And in that sense, this ties back to this idea of that a visualization can be worth 1,000 written words. Okay, are there any questions to this story?
There is a question.
Yeah, a quick question. Have you used either in these kind of stories or other stories about conflict, social media posts or videos that you find on social media to give more of a ground level view?
Sure, yeah. I mean, this is a very from the top view, definitely. I mean, just now we are researching a story about the rebels or the militia in Congo, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and how they have taken over mines in East Congo, and we want to start the story with videos from those mines and from the rebel takeover there. Yeah.
I actually one other question also, that I'm not familiar with Q. Is that something that you built in house or?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we built that in house. It's kind of open source, but it hasn't been maintained, unfortunately. But we've built that in house. When we started to build that, Data Wrapper, I don't know if you are familiar with Data Wrapper. It was just at its beginnings, and so we weren't quite sure how that would develop, and so we decided to build our own tool. In the meantime, Data Wrapper, I mean, I love Data Wrapper, it's great. We noticed it, or something, we use Data Wrapper as well, and we try to differentiate our own tool in the sense that it's even simpler than Data Wrapper. So it doesn't have that many options. And this is the reason for this, is that we really require our journalists to do their own charts. So it can't be too complicated. But we use Data Wrapper for more complex visualizations as well sometimes, like the visuals team does.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, I think they're all eager to listen.
Okay. This next piece is a story about Switzerland in the future. And this is really kind of a research and development article or project. And we were trying to use cutting edge technology to really tell an engaging story on climate change. And I will also show the article quickly. So we start here in the Alps. Actually, we start with a count up. I'm going to show you the whole thing because this was maybe something that we would do different in the future. So, and we start here in the Alps, and we peer down onto a new lake. It's the year 2075. The glaciers have melted, and we move out of this view and then into a kind of flyover view of Switzerland, and we fly along this river, the Aare River. It's the largest river that runs through Switzerland. And then there's different features also along the way. So there's places where you can kind of see how it used to look also. And the topic is it's mainly focused on water and how this very water-rich landscape will change by 2075. And then we also use data visualization to contextualize what you see. Just going to go, we have one more scene also where you kind of dive down into the landscape. So also trying to combine this like ground view with this more colder view from above, let's say. We go here down to a forest. It has also changed. The leaves are much browner, and the risk for forest fire is also much larger. And you can see that it's not very alarmist. So there's not. It still kind of looks okay. And this was also something that was very important for us to have this balance between, we talk a lot about adaptation, things that can be done now that will also still continue to create a livable future, while also still showing these risks of like extreme events such as forest fires or landslides or things like that. Here. This was a very large project. You can see this was the team. We had also a large scientific, or many scientists who helped us and with whom we could talk. And yeah, we worked on this for a year. Of course, not only on that, exclusively on that. These kind of articles always have to be done next to the kind of daily business. This is maybe something you are also more familiar with, kind of from the design process. The difference here is that storytelling is very important, and the whole research and development part. Research is also very important. I won't go through everything in complete detail, but I want to highlight a few things that are very specific for this kind of work we do at the newspaper. So with the concept development, one thing that we did quite early on was to create this visualization of the river that we wanted to fly along, and then think about what are the topics that we could talk about at each point, and what data do we have that could support these topics and that we could show there. So this was kind of a combination out of a storyboard, data set list, and topic list. Classic kind of pitch format to win our bosses over, also with some first sketches of how it could look. And we also worked with a technology partner for the first time. So MapTiler provided this kind of 3D landscape for us and supported us in the project. In terms of storytelling, so we work. One of our main collaborators in this story was our science editor, our climate editor, Sven Titz. And I always like to work in the tools which our journalists work in. So this is Word. We did the story outline in Word, and then I created a kind of storyboard where we could collaborate on. I would add images, sketches. Sven would write the text, and I would comment on different things in the text as well. And then just playing around with simple prototypes, just getting a feel of how it could look, making a screen capture of the kind of path that we might take along the river. So these were all kind of first steps. Then in terms of research and development, for those who are interested, we had, on the one hand, those scenes that you saw where you are on ground level. Those were done in Unreal. And kind of the difficult part was to, so those are real places. The topography is correct, and the lakes that we show are actually modeled lakes that will be there, or should most probably be there in 2075. So taking kind of high-res topography and models of these new lakes specifically of the glacier bed, which the glacier is gone, so there's kind of a new topography there. And bringing those into QGIS, this is an open source tool that we use a lot. It's a geoinformation system used to visualize and wrangle geographic data. So we kind of wrangled the data there, and then we brought it into Unreal. We also brought satellite imagery into Unreal, and then the shapes of the lakes that we got from the scientists. And then based on that, we modeled and kind of drew that new landscape. And this was done by John Core. He's someone who we brought in externally. He's a freelancer, and he is a specialist in using or finding kind of new ways how to use technology to tell journalistic stories. And this was one of the first versions you can see here, which looks like a completely different landscape. And then we had the satellite map. It was kind of similar here that we had to export the images that we got from MapTiler. We exported them through QGIS, and also with that new data layer that showed the new lakes or the new vegetation. And then we photoshopped the satellite imagery, and then we re-uploaded it into the map engine. And this map engine created map tiles out of these images, and this allows us to render these parts of the map in the browser. What was very important for us in this whole research part was talking to the scientists. We had 2 scientists who we had very close contact with. We would ask them about the data and kind of try to understand if our assumptions or our knowledge that we have was aligning with current scientific knowledge. So one example of this is also that you might know that there's different climate scenarios. And there's a few, but the 3 main ones are kind of like one that assumes lower temperature by 2100, one that assumes middle temperature, and one that assumes high. And a lot of journalistic outlets and a lot of studies often use the very high pathway, but this is at the moment not seen as the realistic one. So we took the middle one, which is seen as the realistic one, which means that our data, like I was saying before, it doesn't look that bad, but it's also not that alarmist. We got a lot of data from different scientific institutions that we had to sometimes wrangle and kind of merge. I learned a lot about climate science. I used Python for this, or pandas mainly. And then we also received visual research. So images from places that were already in this climate that we will have in 2075. We could use those images as references to create these simulations and visualizations. And we also used satellite images from very dry years to kind of model the landscape. In terms of visual design, these are kind of the classic things. We had a mood board, examples that we really liked from futuristic games and futuristic movies. And then just trying out different ways to bring a little bit of that language into the visualization. In the end, we had quite a reduced design because, I mean, here you see it on desktop, but on mobile, again, it's a satellite image, so there's just a lot going on. Iterating through different data visualizations, and then prototyping the kind of the harder pieces, for example, the loading screen, or then the way that we interact with the map to kind of look back onto today. and also the way that we scroll through the landscape, and then the transition between this view and the kind of bird's eye view. Then once we had figured out how to do all these things, how to create these assets, we had to produce them, of course. And we also had to bring it into code. We had a lot of work in getting this 3D satellite map to work well on mobile. And we used a kind of this JSON format where I could actually collaborate with the developer. This is kind of a text file that is written in a certain way that defines kind of the locations we fly to, what the text is, how the camera is looking at the landscape, what kind of annotations are there, what kind of overlays are on the map, and so on. So this was great. It's not a tool with an interface yet, but it's already a way that I, as a designer, can easily collaborate with the developer. We had, it's not a video, but I encourage you to look at this article by the New York Times on the Maui fire. This was our great idol for us. It's a very smooth experience. Yeah, it's just a very smooth experience. So it's really nice, very nicely done. And then in terms of publishing the article, of course, it was published on our homepage in English and in German, and then also in all different kinds of channels, or no, that's not the right word in English, I think, all different kinds of platforms. So of course, we have newsletters, but then also on Instagram, on TikTok, and on personal social media accounts. And it was very, very successful on TikTok and on Instagram, even more successful than the article in itself was actually on our homepage, which was interesting. I think I will just go through these tools and skills quickly, because then we can just open up the question round, the discussion round. So to kind of summarize, we have really a lot of different skills in our team, and this is really nice. I'm just going to show them all here. So there's people who can code. We have great illustrators. We have people who love to get into really complicated data sets and find out how to visualize them in new and innovative ways. We are getting more and more 3D skills. Motion design is very important, cartography, UX, UI, data analysis, and then this whole research topic, and of course, writing. Not everybody writes, but some of us do also write. And then from like more these kind of soft skills, let's say, I think it's always a cliche, but I think with journalism, it's really, really true that you have to be curious and you have to be critical, and you have to like being creative under a certain kind of pressure. It's very important to have a design sense, of course, for these kind of articles, and to enjoy staying up to date with technological developments. Of course, AI is a huge topic now that we are also encouraged to experiment with. Of course, not publish directly, but use it as a tool. And something that I had to really learn is how to manage my time well, because that's crucial in journalism. And something that I think people coming from a design school or design background are really equipped to do is to work collaboratively, because the journalists who, the traditional kind of journalists, they will often work alone, but more and more we see that the teams to create these very visual stories and stories that work across platforms, there has to be a team with a lot of different skills that come together. And so being able to collaborate together is very important. We do have a traineeship. If you speak some German, I encourage you to apply. And I will upload my slides to my website. So that's the other QR code if you're interested. And yeah, feel free to reach out also if you have any questions, but let's first talk now.
Thank you, Adina. I apologize, it had to be coming in and out, but yeah, sorting things out, as we said. But thank you so much. I don't know if you have any questions, guys. Yes, we have it here.
Hi. I'm interested in your journey from starting as a visual communication major to being in a place now where maybe you're able to do more like developing, coding, more like technical skills. And I'm wondering, did you learn that on the job, or like did you take time outside of like your studies to be doing that, or was it your university that equipped you to do that?
Everything a little bit. I'm not a coder. I mean, I've tried multiple times to learn React or Ember or one of those frameworks, and it always drove me mad, drove me crazy. But at Aalto University, I took a course in Python, and I really like Python because it's not so frustrating for me. Because there's with all these things with web development, I'm very fast when I design something, but then if I have to do it in code, I become extremely slow, and this is always so frustrating. So with Python, I just wrangle data, and I really like to do that. And for me, it was a much simpler language to learn, and the setup is much simpler and everything. So I do some of that, and just through trying always again to learn to code, I have a kind of working understanding of how things work, and I can read, for example, those JSON files. I can read some of the code. I can understand what the developer is struggling with. So my failed attempts weren't for nothing in the end. But yeah, it's something I picked up along the way, but I'm not a full coder.
I have a question. Most of the projects you show, and maybe this is because of the nature of the newspaper or the media in which you're working, but most of the projects are kind of photography based or more kind of maps. So I'm just wondering, is there a chance in your job or something that you do to do more kind of illustrative type of work? Do you do any sort of drawing, or if you have to explain a process or something, how do you approach that? And I don't know if the newspaper, I'm thinking like Scientific American type of illustrations or something like that.
Yeah. This is just by chance that I'm showing. I mean, I worked for a short time. I worked also in film before I got into graphic design. So I like to really work in a cinematic way. I love to work with photography, and I love to work with maps. But we have also great illustrators, and if I have an idea that can be done with illustrations, I really like to work with them. And this is an example that I did with an illustrator by us. It looks at the amount of rubble that was produced by the earthquake in Turkey, which was 2 years ago, I think now. And we explain with these kind of illustrated infographics how this rubble can even be removed and recycled. And there's also maps there, but there's also a lot of illustrations. And yeah, we hired 2 scientific illustrators now recently. So I hope that we will do more of this kind of work. Yeah.
Next, whenever you want.
Thank you. Sorry, I have been struggling with my computer since this morning, and this is why I was late. This might not be necessarily a question for you directly, but maybe more generally to the environment in which you work. And the question is, what kind of strategies or methods or protocols do you have in place to avoid bias in your stories? Like I imagine there's something. Is it left to each individual contributor? Is there kind of like any, structural thing in place?
That's a very good question and a very big question, of course. At the newspaper I work, we have quite a lot of different, each journalist, or we have a lot of different opinions in our newspaper. The newspaper is kind of center right from its political direction, so that's something that is clear to everybody in Switzerland who reads this newspaper. But still, we don't just have journalists who are politically in the center or right. We have people from all over the political spectrum. That's one thing. And yeah, we try to, the other thing that's very important is to differentiate between articles that are opinion articles, where this can be really clearly stated, this is my opinion and this is, what I think, versus articles that are an analysis or a background on a topic where you should look at all the pros and cons, so to say, and kind of try to show the whole picture. What I think is very interesting with this work that is often based on data, is based on certain kind of like visual research methods, is that it really allows us to stick very much to facts, in the sense that sometimes, maybe one of our journalists or editors will say, please pick up this topic or do something to this topic. I think that it's like this. And then you're kind of, I don't know if it's like this. And then you're allowed to actually look at the data and really familiarize yourself with the topic. And then even if it's a completely different conclusion that you come to than what was originally thought, if you explain this conclusion, if you make a compelling argument for your conclusion based on that data, then this is completely accepted. So those are just kind of a few methods that we use.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is, please don't take it as a criticism or trying to, I'm just really, really curious. So you mentioned that the newspaper is kind of like center right. Is that something that it is explicitly stated? Is it like everyone that buys this paper will know that they are acquiring a newspaper that leans center right? Like would you say so?
I mean, in Switzerland, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like traditional conservative, more conservative newspaper. It's the quality is extremely high. The quality of the analysis is very high. Also because we have, as I mentioned before, people who are not trained as journalists. They're trained actually in the subject they write about. So I know a lot of people who are not center right in their political leanings, who read the newspaper because they appreciate the depth of the analysis. So that's something that happens often. But through that, it's known then that, this is, it's a centrist newspaper. This is known in Switzerland.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your talk, by the way.
Thank you for your questions.
My pleasure.
So I worked with a policy think tank, like doing visual storytelling as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't really have any metrics for deciding what effective storytelling was. So in the case for NZZ, like how do you guys judge the effectiveness of your visualizations aside from like clicks and views?
Yeah, that's not an easy question. Actually, my boss is looking into that, how we can get better metrics on our visuals, particularly on our visual stories. The most important metric that we have is the amount of time that is spent on the article, the total amount of time, and how deep the the readers scroll. So yeah, it's not, we don't try to get as many clicks, we try to get as many engaged minutes with our content. So sometimes there are articles where not very many people read them, but those that read them spend, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes instead of only 1 minute on it. What else can I say to this topic? When we build something custom, when we have something interactive, for example, or with this other story that I was showing you about the future of Switzerland, there we try to build in certain things. So we try to see, did the readers really click on this particular element? Here with this article, we counted the number of like scrollytelling text that they actually read. So that's also kind of the scroll depth. And here it was actually it was interesting because we found out that over 50% who a lot of people jumped off at the very beginning when there was the loading screen. And this is something we've realized that in the daily news business, people do not want to wait 1 second for an article to load. Very different with a game, for example, where you will accept some loading time. So we lost a lot of readers there, but the people who did wait and came through to the first to the story, I think over 50% read all the way to the end, which is quite a high percentage. So we try to look at those things and understand. Yeah, we also have a very dedicated user group who love to come in and give us feedback to our articles. And this is actually something that I want to make more use of in the future, because I think in the end, talking to people, seeing how they interact with the article, it's one of the most valuable things.
I agree.
Thank you.
I had a couple more questions about that really amazing project. I was struck by what you said about that you got more of an audience on Instagram than you did on the website. And yet it was sort of the end of your process, kind of thinking about social media. And I wondered if it sort of was pushing you, or you considered thinking about social media early in the process, how to tell the story through Instagram or TikTok or other platforms.
I don't really do it so much like that I'm already thinking of the exact end product that will be on TikTok or Instagram, but I do know that as soon as you have things that are animated, that move, they work really well on social media. So this whole way of approaching a web story from a cinematic perspective is very valuable or very helpful afterwards to actually make also a compelling social media story. So we had, for example, also, I don't know if this was translated. Just read in German. Oh, what happened? Sorry, I don't know what that was. Oh, it crashed. Too much going on. Yeah, we also made this animated piece about different scenarios, how Taiwan could attack, China could attack Taiwan. or without attacking them directly, but isolating them. And this is also done with this scrollytelling tool that we have in Q in our toolbox. And also already just this, having this kind of animation of different data layers was very helpful on social media. And this was also a very widely read story on Instagram, or viewed story.
Can I ask one more question about the Switzerland? I'm sorry, with the future project. Sorry,
Okay.
such a cool project. You know, one thing that struck me looking at it is you were creating this project about the future where your readers, your users live. And I was wondering if there was either in this project or elsewhere you'd done any sort of personalization so you could see what does this mean in the town where I live? What, you know, kind of zoom to people's locations.
Yeah, that would have been great to also have that here. A newspaper who does really good work on that is Die Zeit. It's from Germany. They do a lot of climate change stories that are individualized to the place where you live or to your age, for example. We haven't done so many of those yet, or I don't really know. I don't think we have done a really personalized climate change story. We would love to have it really specific for like you said, like the place, like the exact like village you live or something. But it's quite difficult with the resolution of the climate models because they're just too coarse. But I think with this direction that we have here, we could start to think also about more personalization. I would love to do that.
Okay, I think no more questions for now. It was great. It was great to see your journey personally for me, see what you have been doing at the very beginning, and where you are now and the type of projects you're working. I think it's nice to see the breadth, that you're not only working with data kind of in graphs, but that either you're also doing stories and you are, I don't know, thinking more holistically about information and content. So thank you so much for sharing with us your work. Otherwise, thank you so much, Adina.
Thank you.
For today.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank
Please
you so
reach
much
out.
because online.
Yeah, sure. I wish I could be there, but it's too
Next
far.
time.
Next time when I'm in Boston.
We can all go to Switzerland. We don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
I know it's late there, so have a good evening.
Bye, everyone.